Here, let's do the clap.
The clap. 1, 2, 3, clap. Oh man,
so bad.
I think that was
We
good.
gotta do it again.
You want to go again?
Yeah, one more time.
All right, 1, 2, 3, clap. Hey, I think we got it.
And we'll figure it out.
We are good. Yeah. So what's up, man? What's new? How are you doing today?
I just got back from the climbing gym, epic session with a new friend of mine named Peter. He actually reached out to me recently and asked if I needed an extra photographer on my video projects. And it kind of came at an awesome time because I'm like getting back into climbing. I'm, feeling a little better, and I'm getting to the point where I need a support photographer to help me with my channel. I've got a lot of affiliate partnerships right now. I'm working with Black Diamond, I'm working with Rocky Talkies. I just signed an affiliate program with backcountry.com. And I also just applied for an affiliate program with Lululemon for their program as well. So I'm kind of in this position now where I've got all these avenues to start working with these companies that I already love. And I need someone to help me create content around these products. And he just like randomly reached out to me when I like thought of it. I was like, man, I need someone to help me out. And he's just like, hey man, you need help? So it worked out really well. So I met him the other day, kind of talked about everything. And he's definitely psyched to just kind of help out. He's been climbing for 4 years, sport climbing mostly, but he's wanting to get into trad, wants to become a climbing photographer. So he wants to be able to get on like static lines and start jugging and stuff. And that's all, things that I have experience with. So it's going to be kind of a trade at this point. But I think that moving forward, if we're able to be successful with this podcast, and if we're successful with the channels, and we're able to, drive enough traffic and provide for our audiences, I think that it could be, a role that ends up being at least somewhat financially compensated. So it's a kind of a cool partnership. And we ended up climbing today at our local climbing gym at Mesa Rim.
That is fucking awesome, man. Good for you. And that's cool for you guys and stuff. And, stoked to see what you guys will come up with for the channel and everything. How was climbing? How's the body?
Really good. I don't know if you saw my story, but I shoved my feet into my Miras.
I saw that. Yeah. How did that feel?
Horrible. Yeah. I like got it in there barely. I swear my foot is like longer. I don't know.
It's funny because it's actually possible based on your calcaneus being reconstructed, but it sounds like, like, are you high, man? Like, no.
Yeah. I honestly, like, I don't know, if I'm thinking about like jumping in the shower and like soaking my climbing shoes in hot water and like doing all those things they say with new shoes and trying to stretch them out a little bit because they haven't been used in like 5 months.
Yeah.
And so I think they've definitely shrunk a little bit because my toes were screaming. And it was funny, like my heel wasn't even that painful. It was my toes just like getting slammed up against the corner of the shoes. And I don't know if you have this, but I am like numb. My pinky toe and my ring toe on my right foot, they're like, it's lost sensation. Something's happened during the surgery. And now I have like numbness in those both toes.
A blessing and a curse. Yeah, no, I'm not experiencing any numbness or anything like that, but I think for so many reasons that could be going on, even just your feet not being as conditioned as they were. It might come back quicker, but you're coming from like inactivity, not having your feet shoved in those fun torture devices, and then the combination of maybe extra swelling and sensitivity. So who knows? I think you'll get more comfortable over time, but yeah,
I hope so. Yeah, I like took a couple steps just on the soft floor and like hung from the wall and just kind of like barely tried to place my feet up on some holds, and I was just like, that's not happening.
Yeah,
it was just like way too painful.
Doesn't feel good. Yeah, I haven't been climbing that much lately because obviously I've been not feeling too great, pretty crummy, and my back's been hurting. But I was doing it in approach shoes, and that was pretty comfortable for the ankle, so that was nice. But obviously, I'm not really climbing hard or doing anything in that.
But yeah, the Miras didn't work, but my Mythos are super comfortable, and I can wear those. And actually today I taped up and tackled a 10 plus crack in the gym called the Tahoe crack. It like starts off with this like slightly overhanging hand crack, and then goes into these like wavy pods where you're doing like thin hands, and then it goes into finger locks, and then it goes into like this vertical section of rings and fingers, and then opens up to hands again at the top. And I on-sighted it, which was pretty sick. I felt super fluid and felt great putting my feet in there, and just was really exciting. So definitely a big milestone for me, and really psyched about the progress there. I really honestly was like, I wrote crack climbing off until the spring, and I don't know, I saw someone do it the other day, and I was just like, you know what, let me give it a try. And I tried it without tape, and my hands were honestly the most painful part about that experience. And today, like, I made sure to tape up, and it was cruiser. It felt really good. So definitely psyched on that.
That's awesome, man. Get it. Yeah, no, that's really cool, and happy to hear and everything. So yeah.
Welcome back to the Climbing Majority, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Kyle Broxterman. I'm here today with Max Carrier. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring and breaking down my accident that happened back in June, and diving into kind of what happened, how to avoid a situation like that in the future. And Max is going to be guiding us through this interview. So Max, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle. And welcome everyone listening. So how you doing, Kyle? What's up?
You know, just living life, climbing, trying to get psyched, and just really excited about our projects we got going here, and excited to get back into that whole climbing scene.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure, and excited in a weird way to kind of dive back into this story that I feel like I've heard several times, but each time I keep getting more out of, and obviously so relatable for myself personally. So yeah, I mean, I think a good place to start would probably be, tell me about like the person you were climbing the day of your accident. How hard were you climbing? Whether that be like bouldering, sport climbing, mountaineering, ice, whatever that is, and what that question means to you.
At the day that I was climbing, I had been climbing for roughly 6 years, and as I had discussed in our previous episodes, I, became a mentor pretty quick in my climbing and started leading everything. And so, I had basically 6 years of on-site leading trad experience. And I always kind of played it safe-ish. I played it within my on-site ability, and that level, continually grew as I climbed. And so at the day of the accident, I was comfortable on-siting 10 plus, 11 minus. Trad and sport, I was on-siting 11 pluses, projecting 12 minuses, and very little mixed or ice climbing experience. I had top roped a WI4, a freestanding water pillar in Utah called the Donner Sickle, and I had scratched around a little bit on top rope in some very obscure places. But I would say a majority of my experience was within the 5.9 and 5.10 range, and all of that basically trad, and most of it leading. So, I had built this very wide pyramid and thick pyramid. As people talk about the climbing pyramid, where you want to build a base of a certain grade before you start to try a harder grade above it. And I had spent 6 years building a 5.10 base. So I was very much focused on like getting into that new level of climbing 11s, and kind of blinded by that focus. I was just very focused on like pushing the grades, because I had felt that I had built such a strong base at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good place to definitely segue into talking about risk. So you said you've got this big foundation, climbing in the 10s, been doing that for a long time, and kind of looking to push that, right? So what kind of climber were you when it came to taking risk?
I think that I took on, looking back, I probably took on more risk than was necessary. I definitely leaned into my ability to climb first and foremost. And that got me away with a lot. And, I would purposely run a climb out just for the sake of it. Even if there was opportunity for good gear, I would get into that free soloing mindset. I'm just like, I know that I'm not going to fall here, or at least I thought I was, I felt comfortable enough to say that. And so I would climb up and be run out and relish it. I'd look down and smile and just be like, hell yeah, And so I definitely think that the risk part of it kind of played a bigger role in the climbing than I thought. And I trusted the gear a lot, probably more so than I should have. And I didn't fall too much. Like I said, I had been climbing within my on-site ability. So I didn't fall very much in the very few times that I did. The cams and whatever protection I put in held. And so I had this positive reinforcement that I knew what I was doing. And yeah, outside of that, I definitely took on runouts for the sake of efficiency. I would definitely sacrifice safety for efficiency, especially at belays. I definitely think that risk, I kind of became a little numb to it and definitely took on more risk for the sake of efficiency a lot. I would, my buddy and I would practice unroped scrambling, high up in the mountains, 5'6", 5'7". We were like, it's just better to free solo. It's faster. There's not really that much protection anyway. And I really enjoyed the risk. I really enjoyed how close to the edge of life and death you are. You are in complete control of whether or not you're going to survive. And I really liked the edge, and I liked to find it in my eyes. I found it in a controlled, in a controlled environment. I think that I really understood my own abilities and what I could solo and what I couldn't. And so I definitely pushed that a little bit. And even I did do one free solo out in Arizona. It was a 5.5, but it's an old school 5.5. If I were to honestly grade it, I would give it a 5.7, I think. And yeah, I climbed it once on lead and then came back about a week later and free soloed it. And it was a 3-pitch climb. I was probably 300-400 feet off the deck at the top. And it was amazing. I remember halfway up the pitch looking down and just smiling and just being feeling so free and just absorbing the exposure and just how insane the whole situation was. But I remember being all right, focus, get back to climbing. You don't have any ropes, so you got to really, figure this out. And yeah, I made it and it was awesome. And after that moment, I wasn't really called to free solo anymore, but I definitely, for the lead climbing, I might as well have been free soloing for a lot of the climbs, just because of the runouts. And I don't know, if I couldn't find good gear, my instinct was to keep climbing rather than to stop and figure it out. I was just it's going to be better above. It's going to be better above. They'll just keep climbing through it. And I got away with it a lot. And yeah, so risk was definitely a big portion of my climbing. And I really enjoyed the risk aspect. And I think I definitely, in retrospect, had a bad relationship with risk.
Yeah, really interesting. I think we kind of talked about this a little bit the other day, but there is this interesting fine line in climbing where it is about being on that kind of edge and carefully operating on that. And that edge is different for everybody, right? And it's how close can you get to that edge and how comfortable can you get with it? But how safe can you be while being there, if that makes sense? And I think there's so many different ways to mitigate and to deal with risk. And there is really that fine line on one day, I think we talked about in episode 2, where it's had I not fallen, all those things I associated with climbing well, I was doing that day, and so I think that's really, really interesting thing and hard to reconcile as a climber, right?
Yeah, I think that it's such a good point that you brought up in that last episode about how, if nothing had gone wrong, you would have just associated that with being a good climber. And I think that it's so important to say, because that's what happened for 6 years. There was probably a lot of decisions that could have ended up very, very badly for me, but they didn't. And so instead of being like, learning from the experience, I am there, positively reinforced for that behavior. And, whether that is running it out or like continuing climbing to try to get a better hold, or, now you're efficient because you can climb faster with less gear, like there's all these positives to the risk aspect. It's not like you're not just taking on risk for the fuck of it. There's definitely reasons behind it. You're either doing it for speed, you're doing it for efficiency, you're doing it because you're getting pumped and, you think a gear is going to be better or slightly above you. There's all these other reasons to feel okay with adding more risk to the equation for some sort of better goal moving forward. And yeah, it's a catch, it's a trap. And yeah, I definitely think it's an allure for a lot of people. And like you said, until something goes wrong, it's just positive reinforcement.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, so I guess like throughout this period of climbing and stuff, did you have like main climbing partners? Do you have lots of different climbing partners? Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
So I started climbing, 6 years ago in San Diego. Like I said, I became kind of a mentor for the peer group around me. So I had a little handful of friends that would climb with me. I would say like Josh, Jory, Robert, Jen. That's the first 4 to come to my mind. So I had like a rotating group of 4 people to climb with.
Yeah.
And then Josh and I went on that big adventure. We moved to Colorado. We ended up launching a business together, and we traveled across the United States. And so him and I were climbing partners for that entire time. I would say for the majority of my climbing career, Josh was my partner, and we basically we lived together. So we were just every time we were climbing, it was with Josh. Every time we were doing a mountaineering trip, it's with Josh. And so, we had this really tight bond, this really tight relationship, because not only were we climbing together all the time, but we were launching a business together. We both worked in fine dining servers. We had so much in common, and, that carried into our climbing as well. And I think that we were able to pull off a lot of really cool stuff because of that kind of relationship that we had. But yeah, after Albania, it was mostly with my girlfriend, Hannah, for the short amount of time that we were climbing together. And we had been climbing since we met. So we were climbing for like 2 years. And, I took her up on multiple trad adventures. I've been multi-pitching with her. And so we definitely had, I'd say, 2 years of solid experience climbing trad together. But I'd say most of my climbing partner-wise has been done with people I know very well.
Okay, super cool. And so, yeah, you're saying you climb with Hannah. Like, obviously, I climb with Ray, like, as we talked about in the last episode. So, how's your climbing relationship with Hannah, like, particularly?
I would say really good. She definitely trusts me a lot, and puts, all of her trust in me, and doesn't ask too many questions. I basically just kind of lead. I, set up the top rope, pull her up. So all she has to do is pull gear from the wall. But yeah, we are a great, team. We communicate really well. We use radios while we climb, so we can communicate super effectively with each other. And, yeah, it's been really good. I wouldn't say we have this like very well-rounded climbing experience. We definitely haven't done any sort of mountaineering trips, or, I'd say we've done, maybe like at max, probably 5 or 6 pitches at max together, and pretty low grades. And so
pitches or multi pitches, you mean?
Like 6 pitches within a multi pitch.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, the majority of our climbing experience together has been pretty mellow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nothing super crazy.
So sounds like a little bit different comfort levels and difficulties and stuff. And yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, like, what about the day you went climbing? Like, what was your mindset like? Like, how were you feeling? Yeah, mentally.
So I had just moved to Reno. It had been about 3 weeks prior to this accident. And the weekend before this accident, I went out to Donner Summit and climbed a climb called One Hand Clapping. And it was one of the first times I was like back on alpine granite trad, because I had just spent 7 months in Albania climbing limestone and just sport climbs. So, I was kind of getting back into it, and I had this fire to to start climbing again. We had done a road trip on the way back from Albania, and I climbed in the Black Canyon. I climbed a little bit in Aspen, and so I had gotten a little bit back into the trad, but it had been a while since that I had done it. So Donner Summit was kind of like this test piece, and I went out there and kind of had like this little mini epic. We showed up with half the amount of gear that I was supposed to have, and we decided to just keep climbing anyway. And so I just like came into this like save gear mindset. So I was again taking on more risk than I should have, and I don't know if you've been seeing my posts, but I recently am actually in the current process of posting that one hand clapping climb. And, pitch 2, there's like this crazy corner, and I was like really struggling with gear. I didn't have a lot of it. So it ended up just all being on the wrong side of my harness. I'm like in this corner trying to fiddle with gear and like trying to get it in. And it just like wasn't going very well. The climb itself, at least for pitch 2 for me, it was pretty like hard to protect. It was kind of awkward. And so I'm just like kind of having this like mini epic up there. And then pitch 3 is like this old school 10C. After this hand traverse, you get up to this like really flared left leaning crack and like this kind of slopey. And I end up taking a fall on this climb, and I fall on this nut. And before I fell, I was like kind of scared to take a fall. I didn't really trust the gear too much. Like I said, it was like this flaring crack. I didn't have any offset cams. I kind of went into this climb a little underprepared. And so I had this like yellow number 2 nut in there. And I was just like really sus on it. And so I ended up like having to take a fall on it, as much as I didn't want to. And it held. The main reason why I think it held was because the route zigzagged so much that I had a lot of rope drag in the system. And so the pieces that I had that were on the opposite sides, like pulling in opposite directions, added a lot of friction to the system and took a lot of pressure off the piece that I fell on. And so I fell on that. I was able to climb back through the crux. I ended up just being on the wrong side of the crack, and I had to like get on the other side, and it was way easier. But so after this moment, I had fallen on trad. It had been 3.5 years since I had taken a fall. So it was like this big moment for me. I was like, hell yeah, the piece fell. At the time I hadn't done that like mental processing of like, oh, there was rope friction. That's why, the piece held. I was just like, hell yeah, trad's sick. Trad always holds. And so, I was very fearful in that moment. And then that flat fall kind of like solidified that trust and like got rid of the fear that I had. And so coming into this next weekend, you asked me about my mindset. I am just like super confident. I'm feeling really relaxed. We're just going out for a day of trad cragging. We're not doing any sort of multi-pitch, climbing with a new partner. So I'm not trying to do anything too crazy. Hannah's coming with me. And so it's just supposed to be a really casual day. And I wasn't really fearful or nervous or anxious. We even started later in the day because the climbing area we were going to be in was going to be hit by the sun pretty early on in the day. So, we had a relaxed morning, just kind of came out there in the middle of the day. So yeah, I was just really calm, confident.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like you were in a good mindset and stuff and been climbing regularly and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, with that kind of, I think, setting the stage of, where you were mentally and how you were feeling, why don't we get into like the meat and potatoes of the story, and why don't you kind of take us through that day, like, how was the approach, the climb, what happened in your fall? Take it away, man.
Cool. Yeah. So it was in July, and it was a Saturday and a sunny day, and we were going out to an area called Woodford Canyon, and we were in a sub canyon within Woodford Canyon called Cloudburst Canyon. The area is only found on Mountain Project. There is no guidebook to it, which was a reason why we were pretty excited to go there, because definitely see less traffic. Seemed like a lot of the routes that were put up there were put in relatively recently. And my buddy Nate, that I met through my channel, Brox Rocks, reached out to me and was like, hey man, I'm a local climber here. Let me show you what it's all about. And so I was excited to have a guide for the area. And yeah, so we showed up. The parking lot is pretty close to the road, just a dirt road that you park off of. I would say we're about half an hour south of Lake Tahoe, about an hour, 15 minutes south of Reno. And we park on the side of the road. I would say maybe 2 minutes off the main road. So pretty close. We get out, we talk to Nate. It's the first time meeting someone, especially a climbing partner. You kind of just like suss out the vibes and then kind of see if you're comfortable with them. And yeah, everything was really good. He seemed knowledgeable about the area. I felt confident about kind of his whole vibe and trusted him. So we started hiking up into the canyon. At first, it was this really narrow trail, but very well maintained. The bushes were cut out, but it quickly turned into kind of an involved approach. It wasn't extremely long. I don't know, maybe took us 30, 40 minutes to get up to where we were supposed to go, but definitely started crossing some streams, definitely did some scrambling. We were dodging stinging nettles, which is like these really painful plants that you can run into. And towards the top, right where we stopped, there is definitely this really loose scree field of like dirt and gravel and loose rocks. And it was just like treacherous just to even get up with our packs. And so, we finally get up this like little gully and set up shop, and we kind of just like spread our gear everywhere. There's not this like designated spot to hang out because it's not this well-established crag. And so our shit is kind of just like spread out everywhere. Everything's kind of like sliding down this scree slope. It's like not that enjoyable. Little did we know, just about 15 feet above us was like this perfect area that they had built. But we didn't know it was there.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
Yeah, so we're there. We're in this area called the Green Tongue, and there's this 5'9" corner crack that we start up. I lead it. Start trad leading with Nate as my belayer. Feel super comfortable. Other than those like first day lead trad jitters. Everything's feeling really fine. Gear's feeling good. Movement's feeling good. So I've complete that climb. Nate and Hannah follow suit. Still feeling really good. We go to the next climb, which is the Green Tongue. It's a 10B. It's like this broken finger crack. And I onside it without too much problem. The gear was a little finicky, but like not that bad. Nate climbs it after me, and then Hannah climbs it after him. And so we done that. And there was only we were kind of basically done with this area, except for this one climb that was labeled in Mountain Project as the unknown 11-. We were about to just skip it and go to this other climb that was going to be a 10C. It was like this classic climb in like another sub area of the canyon. But, like I had mentioned before, I had built this big pyramid of 10s, and I had just on-sighted 5'9" and 5'10". And I was like, all right, there's a 5'11-. Like, I got to go after this. This is what I'm here for. I've got to push the grades. I got to be able to take a fall. I took a fall last weekend and it turned out fine. It's time to go for it. And so, I started roping up for this climb. It's on this big slightly overhanging wall. The crack itself is like this lightning bolt crack that's slightly leaning left. And there's a 10- just to the right of it that shares its anchors. So I actually had the opportunity to climb something easier and then set up a top rope on this new climb to suss out the gear beta and the movement. But I decided that was not something I wanted to do. I definitely got a little focused on the on-site. I think that even to this day, it is my favorite style of climbing. I think it is the purest expression of your abilities. And to me, projecting a route really doesn't excite me that much. To me, it's about that raw adventure, that raw experience of your first time touching the rock, your first time climbing that climb. Can you do it? Can you figure it out on the fly? Can you pull it off? Do you have the abilities to climb this the first try? And that to me is like, I don't know if it's because that's what I've been doing most of my time, but I really, really like that style of climbing. And so I think I was allured by the on-site for this climb. And so I decided to skip the top rope and to go for the on-site.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm sure you have a lot of time to process and think about.
Yeah, just like you had mentioned your cam, it's like one of those decisions that you think about, but you're just like, I'm good.
Yeah, for sure. So it's already a super interesting story, right? Like you've met this guy, Nate, through your online platform and stuff. You're with your girlfriend, Hannah. You guys have had this kind of interesting approach and you're there and you're at the base of the climb and you're ready to give this thing an on-site. So, what happens from there?
The climb was protected by 3 bolts. One was at the base and 2 were at the top, with the crux crack system in the middle needed to be protected by trad gear. So I start climbing, I could clip the first bolt standing, which was nice. I'm nice and tall too. I'm 6'2", so I was able to get it with my tippy toes. But I, start climbing. It's this left leaning crack. I get past the bolt. The climbing is already pretty full on, very athletic and demanding. Like I said, it's slightly overhanging, so it's like a lot of pressure on your hands. You can't really rest that much. So I just get into that sending mode and just start breathing and like trying to relax and really start focusing on climbing. And the first piece I get in is a 0.3. It's this really shallow placement and this like slightly horizontal kind of like diagonal crack. And I didn't have a lot of time to figure out the gear. I just like saw a placement. I placed it. It went in. It passed a couple tugs and I clipped it and I continued climbing. I didn't really put too much thought into it other than that. About 5 feet past that, I put in a small offset peanut. I think it was either a 3 or a 4. They're rated to 5 kilonewtons. That one sunk in pretty well. I clipped it, climbed up, got to this little resting ledge. And, like I said, this thing is overhanging. So I'm able to rest with one hand on the wall. I switch, another hand rest. And on this little resting ledge, I'm able to get another DMM offset peanut just above my head, right below the crux. And that one was another solid piece. I think this one was slightly smaller than the one below me. And at the time, I am just treating these nuts as these most bomber truck loaded pieces of gear. The 5 kilonewton rating didn't mean anything to me. I was just like, it could have been a number 4 cam. It's like, that's my mindset towards these placements I was putting in. Full trust, no sus, just it was a bolt. And so, I take a couple deep breaths. I start climbing. I get past my piece, get past the crux. I'm just above the crux on this like left leaning sloping hold. The move is to go out right to this like jug that I saw. And it was a pretty far move. I was about 6 or 7 feet past my last piece measured from my harness. And so pretty substantial distance, I would say. And I just like knew in my skill set ability and assessing what I could and couldn't do, I knew that the chances of me pulling off the move that I knew I needed to do was not convincing enough. And so I didn't want to just go for this hold, potentially fall dangerously, flip around, fall out of control. So I just, was like, all right, cool. I can't figure it out. Not really feeling that good. So I'm just going to fall. I'm just going to let go of the wall. And it was like super calm about it. I just was like, hey, Nick, like not feeling that, I'm going to rest basically. So I'm going to take, and so I was like, take, and I just let go of the wall. Like I was, like at the gym. And yeah, the next thing I knew, I felt this slight tug on my harness and a snap. And then I hit the ground. I fell 30 feet. The first piece literally broke. The wire snapped. The head of the nut was still stuck in the wall. And then the 2 pieces below that pulled out of the wall. The nut below the piece that broke was severely deformed. And the cam that ripped out clearly was loaded diagonally and rotated out of the wall and deformed the lobes on the top side. So yeah, both fell and I hit the ground, just tremendous amount of force. I remember hitting it so hard. I hit right foot first and nothing else hit the ground. It was just my feet. I like hit my feet, like collapsed into my legs and then started rolling down the scree field that we had talked about on the approach. The only thing that kept me from continuing to roll down this hill into rocks and stinging nettles was the bolt at the beginning of the climb that Nate had arrested my fall with his ATC. So yeah, I was just, it all happened so fast. Hannah was behind this boulder recording me climbing. And to me, honestly, miraculously, the recording just ended up not working during the time that I fell. A lot of people are like, oh, do you have videos of it? And I don't. And I'm kind of glad that I don't. I don't want to have to watch that again.
Yeah, that would be pretty brutal to have to like relive that and go through that and everything. So yeah, I mean, like, wow, what an experience. Just hearing that, obviously, like, I feel like I connect and resonate a lot to that story. Just obviously it's a different way things happen, but just I feel your pain, just how traumatic that kind of a situation is and everything, and so much uncertainty. And it's really back to that interesting aspect of like toying that fine line between like, risk and adventure and stuff. Like had you just had actually reached up for that kind of jug and gone a little higher, run it out, you could have just been, clipping an anchor and totally fine. Or you could have slipped doing that and actually had an even more catastrophic fall. So yeah, it's really hard to reconcile sometimes and to think about, but just wow, like what a fall, what a story, man. And I can't imagine also from Hannah and Nate's position, right? Like, a loved one seeing someone go through that's crazy. And then Nate's perspective as well too, of just like, this is like day one climbing with your new buddy, right? And like welcome to the introduction here. Yeah, it's crazy. So
yeah, I feel bad for both of them. Although I'm extremely glad that they were there. Hannah, like I said, was like watching me from behind this boulder. So when I fell, I went out of her view. And she just like went to straight auditory response. And so she heard me hit the ground. She heard me stumble. And then she just hears me scream like, my ankles. And she, is just relieved that it's not silence or, me complaining about my back or me saying that my femur's broken. She's a nurse. And so she's just immediately like running through all this shit that could go wrong. And for me to be screaming my ankles, she like had this big sigh of relief, I thought it was pretty comical.
I cannot imagine it from her perspective. Right. And also the way you said that, like my ankles, there's this really famous ski video of Tanner, I think it's Tanner Hall jumping Chad's Gap in US.
Oh, okay.
And and he cases it and just you can hear like his ankles explode in the ski boots. And as he's like tomahawking through the air, he's just yelling, my ankles are broke, my ankles are broke. And like just hearing you say that like made me think of that. I was like, oh man, like so dramatic and just like this terrible experience for her to go through, right? Like, yeah.
It's a horrible feeling.
For sure.
I feel bad for Nate too, It's his first time climbing with me. I think at the time I kind of came off as a little bit, I don't want to say more experienced because he for sure probably had way more years of climbing than me.
Yeah.
But in terms of difficulty, I think that at least at the time, I felt like, we both probably felt like I had the upper hand. I kind of had like a social channel going. I was posting these POV videos and stuff. So I kind of felt like a little bit like I don't want to say authority figure because it wasn't like that, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I get the gist of it for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And so here I am just like ripping gear like a freaking Jerry and just like decking and screaming with these broken ankles. And he's just like, like just such a change and shock of events, I think, for him. And I feel so bad. And, the poor guy was like using an ATC and he's just like blocking me, keeping me from falling. And I'm just like still like upside down, just like screaming bloody murder. And he can't do anything to help me because if he lets go of me on the rope, I'm going to continue to slide down this hill and like bust my ankles even more. And so he's just like frozen here. He can't help. Hannah's trying to like figure out how to stabilize me. I'm like hyperventilating, panicking, freaking out about how I'm going to pay for everything, what we're going to do. Like all these things are just going through my head, like responsibilities, my life, who I am as a climber, just like identity crisis right off the bat. And just like all these things going through my head and just like panicking, just straight terror, panicking. I had never broken a bone in my body like this before. And I'm just like looking down at my feet and just like grotesquely swollen, especially my right foot was just like you had said, just like a pig's ankle, just like sticking out of my climbing shoe. It's just so disgusting. And I just, there's just like a level of pain that you're experiencing that's just like undescribable, except you just know you're effed. Mm-hmm. It's just like, this is not good by any realm of the word. It's just, this is bad.
Yeah. You're not walking off that feeling.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Wow, man. So
yeah, we're Hannah's able to stabilize me. Like she's like propping my feet up and I'm like leaning back against these rocks and she like gets me stable enough so that Nate can take me off belay. Nate is kind of like starting to gather our shit. Like I said, it was just spread everywhere. And so like didn't help us at all. You know, we're trying to find a way to like scooch me down because we immediately know we're like, all right, we got to get out of here. You know, like that's number one. Let's get out of this canyon. And we were, you know, it's a treacherous way. And so we're trying to like slide down the scree field. I'm like, my harness is on. I've got all the cams and all my quick draws on. And so I'm like sticking to everything as I'm sliding. You know, I wore an expensive harness. And so I'm just like in my back of my head, I'm just like, I can't believe I'm destroying my harness right now. Like, you know, I wear Lululemon pants when I climb too, and those aren't cheap. And so I'm just like, I can't believe I'm destroying my pants right now. It was like all this shit going through my head, just like
consumerism at its finest. Guy's like half dead. He's like, fuck, I love these pants.
Yeah. So I'm just like, it definitely was going through my head trying to like, I'm just like tearing everything up, sliding down these rocks. And yeah, it just like was slow going. Nate decides to like go out to try to find help because we had seen 2 climbers in the valley as we were hiking in. And so he goes out to find them. Hannah's like trying to figure out how to get me down slowly. And we're like barely making progress. He finally comes back. He comes with 3 people. He found 3 people to help. And we end up rigging the system where we've got a big, like a branch that we put underneath my knees that was far enough to stick out in the left and right that the 2 front people could use as handles. And I would put my arms around the shoulders of the people to the left and right of me. And so we would basically just like pick a spot, maybe 10 or 5 to 10 feet where we could put me down again. And so we'd just be like, all right, we're going there. 1, 2, 3, lift. And we'd pick me up and then place me down at the agreed upon spot. And we did that for 3.5 hours all the way out of the canyon, slowly but surely. And everybody's back was like super strained because they're like hunching over, and we crossed through the river. We had to go through the water. The stinging nettles were just ripping us all apart. You know, we went past a hornet's nest. Poor Nate got stung a couple times. And then to cap all this off, you know, poor Hannah is just like shuttling up and down this canyon that took us 30 minutes to go up, and just like carrying all of our gear up and down, like down, going up, carrying gear back down, going up, carrying gear back down. I think she passed us at least 3 or 4 times during this 3-hour extrication period. And, you know, by the time we get back to the cars, we look up in the sky and half the sky is covered in wildfire smoke. You know, I don't know if you were familiar, but out here in Reno and Northern California, there were some crazy fires in the summertime, and we basically kicked it off that day. So I'm sorry, California. It might have been my fault.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah. So like with the actual fall and stuff, did you guys have cell service? Like at any point in time, did you think like, okay, I want to call somebody for help, or was that like never crossed your mind?
I don't think we had cell service. If we did, it was extremely spotty.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't ever get to the point where we were like, we need to call somebody. We're like, we're that messed up. You know, we had a support team. We had 3 other people come to help me. I think that if it was just Nate and Hannah, then I think we would have gotten to a point where we're like, all right, this isn't working. We need someone else to help me.
Mm-hmm.
But thank God that those 3 people were there and they were able to help extricate me, because it made all the difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we've talked about this before in episode 2 and stuff, kind of the financial aspect to rescue and stuff. So at the point of time of your fall, and when you were kind of like debating those things, like, did that ever cross your mind of being like, I don't want to be liable for any more bills than I have to? Like, was that something going through your mind, or not at all? Why don't you kind of take us through that thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the financial aspect was a huge factor, even from the moment I fell. I definitely didn't want to call SAR. I didn't want to have to call for a rescue. And I even took it to the point where I didn't want to go to a hospital. Out here in America, hospitals can be 3 times, 4 times the cost of going to a clinic or an urgent care. And so I was just like, I'm going to urgent care. I got to find out whether or not I'm going to die tonight. And then if I'm not, then I'm going to wait and go to an orthopedic clinic on Monday when they open. And so that's what I did. I ended up taking those decisions under my own judgment and went to an urgent care to get an x-ray. I knew I had a shattered calcaneus. They tried to get me to the hospital. I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm not going. I'm going to wait and go to an urgent care orthopedic clinic on Monday. And yeah, I wanted not only just for the financial aspect, but also the specialty. I wanted someone that was a foot and ankle specialist. I wanted someone that ideally had done this surgery before. And I got lucky. I got a surgeon by the name of Dr. Whitlow who had done a calcaneus reconstruction before. And so I got really lucky. I think that there's a lot of horror stories, especially with people who have broken tib fibs, getting that IR nail through there and just like shattering the bone instead of holding it together. I think that the shattered calcaneus is a pretty delicate procedure, and I think that if someone, some new surgeon in the hospital who's never done it before, I could have a really messed up foot now and not be able to be where I'm at the moment because of those decisions that I made.
Yeah, for sure. For anybody listening that doesn't know, Kyle has a really good accident report on Reddit where he kind of breaks down the whole accident. So you can dive into that as well, too. And do you have your x-ray posted on that as well? Or is it on your social media?
Yeah. So if you look at my social media, Broxrocks, BROX_ROCKS, I've got a story highlight under there called Road to Recovery. It's a picture of me in a wheelchair, and it's quite long, but it definitely showcases the recovery process and the injury itself. I post post and pre X-rays and CT scans of the injury itself and the hardware that was included in that surgery. So check it out.
Yeah, check that out for sure. And also the x-ray of his calcaneus. That was how I and Brock and Kyle here actually kind of met, as I saw the Reddit breakdown and then saw the picture of your calcaneus. And I was just like, oh my God, it looked like powder, it was just like, yeah, wow. I do not understand how someone's going to put that back together, but lo and behold, you're here and crack climbing again and stuff. So that's pretty exceptional, man.
Yeah, it's pretty exceptional. I'll thank Dr. Willow for that. I'll give him all the credit.
Give him all the credit for sure. Yeah. Yeah, man. Wow. Really interesting, unfortunate, eventful story for sure. To take us through and everything. And and anything on your end from the healthcare aspect or pain or anything like that you can think of?
I mean, the pain was really unrelenting for the beginning of the whole thing. I think that especially after surgery, it was the most pain. It was worse than the injury itself. Having to go through that, they did a whole nerve block for my lower leg. And once that wore off, it was absolute hell. I was taking 30 milligrams of oxy every 3 hours. And it still was barely enough to just keep me relaxed enough to watch TV. Otherwise I was face down in the ground with my feet up, just hyperventilating, trying to get through the pain. It was just so bad. And it was worse then, like I said, than it was after the injury. I don't know if I've got some crazy adrenal glands, but I got pumped up after that injury. And I didn't really feel much pain at all until I got to urgent care 5 hours later when they tried to wrap it in a splint. And that was when it really started getting pretty painful.
Yeah, crazy, man. Just the contrast between the way we kind of experienced that and stuff was super interesting. But I had a nerve block as well, too, for my surgery, which was pretty whack, the experience, and watching them put the needle in on ultrasound and everything and just feeling my leg go numb. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of crazy. But I had a similar experience to that as well. Once it wore off, you were kind of just well, shit. Yeah. Where's the pill bottle?
Yeah, exactly. They had put a tourniquet on my leg to do the surgery, and like I said, I actually haven't mentioned this yet, but the calcaneus surgery alone took 2.5 hours to complete, and so I had a tourniquet around my leg for 2.5 hours, and it was funny. The most painful thing directly out of surgery was that area that they tourniqueted. It wasn't even my foot. Thanks to the nerve block, but I was just so shocked at how painful that site was where they tourniqueted my leg. 2.5 hours for a tourniquet is a pretty long time. I would say it's at getting closer to the limits of how long a tourniquet can even be on a limb without losing it.
Yeah, pretty crazy. And I'm obviously not a surgeon, but to my understanding, that's quite a long time to be under. tibia was broken, and they repaired that and the ruptured ligament in like sub an hour, so 2.5 hours to be doing that to the calcaneus is it's a long time they're there doing stuff for sure.
Yeah. The whole surgical process is pretty insane. They literally like go in there, pull back the skin, wrap like the peroneal tendons out and like pull them out of the way. And they take these little tongs and they literally take the fragments and just try to like piece them back together like a puzzle. And they're just like doing thousands of x-rays. Every time you move a little piece, dink, x-ray. Is it good? Oh, let me adjust it a little bit. Another x-ray. Let me adjust it a little more until they've got this big swath of bone that's like wired together, and then just put the plate on and drill all the screws through and then pull the wires out. But yeah, it's just like, I can't even imagine the articulate focus that someone has to have to be able to do that. And they're doing it blind, to be honest. Like it's not like you've got this like 3D model that you get to spin and you get to place, you're working within the human body. And I would imagine that most of it you're working on touch and feel and visual assessment from the X-ray rather than like actually being able to look at it. So it's really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And just the modern miracles of science and medicine, right? Like, wow, if this I don't know, 100, 200 years ago, you'd be in some pretty bad shape, to say the least.
Oh, they'd be amputating my leg. That'd be the answer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess like, we've got the whole kind of story there and how that was and everything. So what do you think your biggest takeaway from this accident is?
So I think that the biggest takeaway is actually kind of learning more about safety. And I think that to better answer that question, I want to dive a little bit into the physics of what happened during the climb and like things I could have done to avoid the situation. So first off, I wasn't wearing a helmet, and there's just literally no justification for that. At the time, I was just like, not a multi-pitch, no rock hazard from above. I'm fine. And that's just very naive. Anything could happen. You could fall with your rope behind the leg and you could hit your head against the wall. You could deck and you could hit your head against the ground. A bird could fly. I don't know. Like, just the options are endless for things to go wrong. And just like not wearing a helmet is just, I don't know. I won't do it again. So to all the listeners out there who find ways to justify not wearing a helmet, just put it on. I know that you see a lot of professional climbers climbing El Cap and doing these crazy projects, not wearing helmets, and that's their choice. But there's a reason that they're professionals and that we're not. And I think that just that in itself is just like a reason to wear your helmet. So that's just lesson number 1. Put your helmet on. Lesson 2, I didn't do any real safety checks with Nate, and there was nothing wrong with the system. Everything was clipped in right. My knot was good, but we didn't go through those basic verbal safety checks. And I think that that's something I won't avoid again in the future, especially with a new partner. For all I know, I could have not even been clipped into the ATC. My knot could have been wrong. I could have just been on the top loop. Like, I was just going off of instinct. And for the situation that I was in, I think that it was a pretty poor choice. So that was definitely another thing to learn, is just do those safety checks. There's a reason why you learn those in the gym, and they sound monotonous, and the whole climb on and everything is just kind of gets repetitive. But as long as you develop your own routine and you are doing those safety checks within the way that you like to do it within your friend group, just keep doing it, because you will catch something one day, and it will save either your life or your friend's life. Lesson 3, really understanding more about the gear itself. Like I had said before, I was trusting micro offset nuts that are used primarily for aid climbing, which I didn't know at the time, as regular pieces of gear. And that was my mistake. There's really nothing else to say about that. It's just educate yourself. Those kilonewton ratings are there for a reason. And in climbing, especially under certain circumstances, those kilonewtons are reached really fast, especially if you're a heavier climber like myself. At the time with it rack, I was probably about 200 pounds, and that's pretty freaking heavy as a climber. And, if you go, we'll put a link in our description here, but there's a force calculator for measuring the amount of force you can put on a piece. It's a little bit it's not super, super accurate because there are so many different factors that play into a fall, but you could get a pretty good idea in terms of how much force you're going to place on a piece, depending on all the different factors. So definitely check that out, kind of build a couple scenarios in your head, and think about it like, all right, how far can I fall with X amount of rope out on a piece, and how much relative force am I going to place on that piece? How many kilonewtons? And I think that understanding that is really good, because if you're putting a 5 kilonewton piece in, you probably only have about 3 feet as a 200-pound climber, I would say. Maybe 2 feet before you should be placing another piece, because anything higher than that, the chances of you going through that kilonewton rating are just going to be exponential. And it's definitely something I didn't know. So do your math. Literally do the math and find out how far above a piece you can climb depending on what it's rated. And I think that'll be really good for everybody to stay educated on, and hopefully prevent a lot of accidents moving forward. And it's definitely how I am going to be approaching my trad climbing moving forward.
Yeah, I think those are some great points and big takeaways. And yeah, just, in hindsight, it's always easy to look back and be like, oh, well, like I should have done this and done that. But in the moment, like these slip ups do happen. And that's why it's really important to have these conversations of safety. And even as something as simple as your partner check, like you said, like you're eventually going to catch something, because, we're human beings and humans make mistakes. Doesn't matter how good you are, it eventually happens. And so I think just repetition, and yeah, know your gear.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think really well said.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. The another lesson is understanding that if you have a short amount of rope in your system, the amount of force that's going to be dispersed onto the piece you're falling on is going to be significantly greater than if you have a lot of rope out. So, on a physics standpoint, ropes are dynamic, and so they stretch, but they only stretch as long as they are. So if you have 100 feet of rope out, they're going to stretch, 30 feet. If you've got, that's an exaggeration. I'm not exactly sure how far they'll stretch, but if you've got 20 feet of rope out, they're not going to stretch as much as they would if they were longer. And so you're going to have a lot more force put on this piece. So in the situation that I was at, I was 30 feet off the deck. So I've only got 30 feet of rope out when I'm falling. And that is it's not a lot of rope. And so it's, going to maximize the amount of force put on the piece. And then on top of that, climbing trad. He was using an ATC, and that's a good thing for trad because there is usually some rope slippage with an ATC, which helps disperse some of that force on that piece into the ATC in the form of friction. But I yelled, "Take," before I fell. I kind of was like, "Take me." And so he locked the system, and then I let go. And so there was no rope slippage in the system at all. It was basically like falling on a gree-gree. And so that also bumped up the force rating of my fall. And so, I'm climbing above micro gear. It's a 5 kilonewton piece. I'm 200 pounds. I'm way past the 3-foot threshold of how far I should have gone. I yelled take, arresting the system, and I only have 30 feet of rope out. So it's just like so many things added up to this situation that put my force on that piece above its threshold and literally broke the wire. And there's a chance that I only pushed that force, 0.5 kilonewtons past its peak, but I did it. I broke it. And so, you just got to think about these things, the rope stretch, the distance, whether you're using an ATC or a gree-gree, whether you're yelling take, whether your belayer knows about rope slippage, all these things play a factor into your trad climbing. And there's a lot more going on to it than just, can I climb it? And it's very, very important to focus on all these minute details before you just start kind of going after it.
Yeah, absolutely. And 5 kilonewtons is not a great margin for error. It's definitely not a 10 or 12 kilonewton cam, right? So, and then as well, there's, rock quality and all these other things we could get into, but I think that could be an entire
I think that also,
episode.
I think that honestly played a factor. After I did fall, I did hear from someone that said that area is notoriously a little crusty at the top, specifically because it doesn't get a lot of traffic. And so I think especially the climb that I was on, I would say less than 100 people have probably climbed that climb. It's like very obscure. And so, there's a very high chance that I ripped out rock with those two other pieces that would have held otherwise. And so, that's another thing, a lesson there is like, not only was I climbing with a new partner, I was climbing in a new area on a route that I had never tried before. I didn't have any experience with the rock quality. I didn't know the area at all. And, those are things that I overlooked. And it's important if you're going somewhere new to just take it slow. You've got every day to climb, like if you're going to an area, climb the lower grades, understand the rock, look for things that could go wrong. Is the rock loose? Is there a bunch of scree on the ground? If there is, why is the rock loose? There's just so many things you can pay attention to. And I think that it's very important just to stay safety oriented, and it's very easy to become sending oriented. And I think it's a trap, especially if you're climbing outside. You've just got to be safety oriented so that you can continue sending and not be like you and I sitting on a podcast complaining about our ankles.
Yeah, there's other places you want to be, folks. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess kind of moving on from that, then, like, how are you like psychologically, like regarding the injury, the surgery, your initial recovery? How has that been for you and your relationships and stuff?
At first, I washed away my horrific situation with Game of Thrones and Netflix binging.
Yeah.
So, I kind of just lived day to day for probably 2.5 months. Every day was a struggle. Every day was a new challenge, and I had nothing else to focus on except getting to the next day. I think overall through that process, I definitely kept pretty high spirits. I just had so much to focus on, managing pain and just like taking care of myself by not moving and keeping my feet up. So I don't think I had a lot of psychological trauma too much up front. There definitely were days where I was just like down, didn't want to talk. I've got this funny video of me rolling through my complex in my wheelchair, just like slumped over, just like running into this wall just for the purpose of it, just like being dramatic and just like feeling really bummed.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the fires were raging. So the sky was orange. You couldn't see the blue sky. You couldn't see anything. It smelled like smoke. And so not only was I trapped in this horrific, painful injury inside, but even when I tried to step outside, I was again trapped in this like horrific doomsday environment. So it was just like a hard psychological toll to take at the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's such an identity crisis as well too. There's so many major psychological things that can happen in traumatic injuries, and it's so much beyond just the physical, obviously. How's
at the time?
Oh, sorry, you go.
At the time, I would like I said, I had just moved to Reno, so I didn't have a job. I didn't have I wasn't in this position where I was like, oh, I'm at a job. I got injured. I'm taking sick leave. I have a job to come back to. I had nothing to come back to. I was like, no job, nothing at all. I had some money saved. So I was, very grateful to not have to like beg for money from my family or like get some sort of really shitty job online where I've got to do, I don't know. I don't want to talk down on other people's jobs, but things I don't want to do. And I was also kind of like worried about the longevity of my life. Like, can I walk normally? How long is it going to take me to walk? Is it realistic for me to get a job where I have to walk? And, before I had gotten injured, I got hired as a contractor for a real estate photography gig. And I I couldn't do that. I couldn't walk. I couldn't go upstairs. I couldn't carry camera equipment and walk around a house. And so that job was kind of like up in the air. And so it was not only this problem of like, I'm dealing with this injury, it was this problem of like, I've got these medical bills and I don't have a job, but like I need to find a job. And so it was just like a really stressful situation. But overall, I think I kept my spirits pretty high, and ended up, everything ended up working out pretty well. And I'm 4 months out of surgery now, and I'm walking around relatively normally all day. I work at a car dealership now as a photographer and a media director, and I'm doing the real estate gigs too. So I'm able to be on my feet now. And there's a lot of those kind of like unanswered questions of the past that kind of have come to a close and are really turning into something pretty beautiful now. So overall, today compared to where I was before, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And in respect to my relationship with Hannah, she was just the best, taking care of me during the whole incident. She is a nurse, and so I do reap the benefits of that. And
lucked out on that one.
So she's just like very caring from her core, and definitely knows how to take care of people. And so I was blessed to have her. And it did definitely take a toll on our relationship. Just, you're not yourself when you're injured like this. The person I was just before the accident and the person I was 2 weeks after the accident was just completely different. I'm crawling up the stairs on my knees. My entire sense of manhood and masculinity and identity is just like completely scratched. And so I think that definitely plays a role in the relationship as well, because you're just not yourself. And as well, she does have some, has understanding and sympathy for my situation, but that doesn't change how the dynamic changes between the two partners. And I think that, it's just been a struggle to stay positive and to regain that kind of masculinity and confidence and just like kind of attitude that I had before the accident. It's definitely been hard to break out of being, I don't know, a little bit lazy, a little bit tired, a little bit just disengaged and checked out. So it's just been it's been a journey, but she's been super supportive, and things are doing pretty good now.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because I know I felt that myself, like kind of feel like looking in the mirror, there's like a stranger there, which sounds kind of funny to say, but it's like just exactly what you're saying, where, you're tired, you're lethargic, you don't feel as energetic or as motivated or as hardworking. And you're kind of like, like, what's happened to me? Like, what's wrong with me? And it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. You've gone through this traumatic injury, and it's affecting, your psyche and your energy levels and all these other things. So it's definitely hard to cope with. How's Hannah doing? Was she like, is she feeling like a lot better about the incident and stuff, or was she feeling like really, really shooken up regarding it and stuff? Like,
so, I had mentioned that I was looking for a job at the time, and she was also looking for a job at the time. And so, we're both in this situation where we don't have jobs, and I get injured and she still doesn't have a job. And so it's just like this crazy stressful situation. Now she has to take care of me and find a job. I don't know what it was about the summer out here, but as a nurse, she didn't want to have to go back into the hospital. I'm sure you can imagine why. And so she was looking for clinic jobs, and it was just like this uphill battle, because she was trying to like breach into this kind of work that she hadn't done before. So it was just like this crazy battle psychologically of feeling like I'm not good enough because these people aren't hiring me, but I'm also trying to do something outside of my scope. So, I have to be patient. And so it was just a lot for her to have to go through. But like I said, other than the effects that trickled down over time that we, deal with on a semi-regular basis, just being open and communicative and just like making sure we're staying connected and stuff has been super important. But it's definitely a challenge. I think that, with anybody that you're around this much, going through an injury like this, it's a lot to handle for both parties, for us and for them. So yeah, it's been a lot, but overall she's been doing pretty good. I would say though, have you lost any hair? Have you noticed any sort of hair loss?
Like on my head?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think I got a couple extra grays, but I don't have any hair loss.
Dude, I swear I'm like thinning up here on the top of my head.
I could believe stress, medication, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I went to a salon and I was like, all right, lady, be honest with me on a scale of 1 to 10. Am I balding? And she's like, you're like a 5 out of 10. I'm like, shit.
She roasted you, man.
She did, man. She got me to buy that $60 hair growth shampoo.
It's like mane and tail horse shampoo. Like,
yeah. So yeah, I don't know if it was the stress from the accident or just the combination of not having a job and the stress of the accident and just all of it compiled on itself. But yeah, I've just been like dealing with that lately. I'm just like, fuck, am I going bald? Like, I gotta stitch this out. I always told myself, like, if I literally start having like a patch or like crazy bowling alleys, I'm shaving it off. I don't know,
man. You got a nice head of hair. It's a good looking head of hair. Might want to ride that one to the bitter end.
Yeah, I've got a while to go. I'm going to take some steps to avoid it, but
I'll support you definitely. Either way, Kyle.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I guess that kind of brings me to, I'd say, like, whatever the final question that I have, which is, like, what does your climbing career look like to you now? Like, what's going to be your approach getting back? How do you see yourself climbing in the future? Yeah,
it's a good question. I really had a big question mark in terms of what that would look like in the beginning, just because I had no idea what my recovery process was going to look like. Like I said, I had sworn off any sort of crack climbing until the spring. But it apparently seems like that's not the case anymore. So there's a local crag outside of town called Owl Rock that I'm actually going to go out with that gentleman I met, Peter, who's going to help me with my content creation. So we're going to go out there. It's just strictly sport climbing, but that'll be my first chance to climb outside for the first time after my incident, which will be pretty exciting. So that's like the step I'm taking at first, just to kind of see how that is. I'll probably do a top rope first. And then if I'm feeling super comfortable, I'll lead a bolted sport climb, and I'll be able to kind of understand where I'm at in my headspace at the very least. I think that'll probably be the biggest question mark, is how comfortable am I, 5 feet above a piece, even if it's a bolt. And also how much, risk am I willing to take? Cause my ankle is still relatively, I would say, fragile. And so I can't risk a deck at all. And I definitely can't risk, a low angle slab fall where I'm like twisting my ankle and shit. So I have to play it really, really safe. Really just err on the side of caution and just take baby steps and kind of see where it goes. But I definitely, at this point, foresee myself trad climbing in the spring and able to produce content again for my channels for POV. So definitely pretty excited about it. Moving forward, I think that my approach for climbing is going to be completely focused differently. I'm no longer going to be focusing on pushing the grades. To me, it's not worth the risk anymore. There's no soul or fire in it for me anymore. I've started to work on a lot more other passion projects that are feeding that fire for me. So climbing is going to be mostly aesthetic and adventure. I'm going to be searching for, mountains, aesthetic corners, beautiful climbing that will help my audience connect with the sport of climbing. I definitely foresee myself at the very least getting back to where I was as a climber before the accident. So, climbing 10s, trad, I think that's my goal. Anything past that will be sugar on the cake. And that'll be just a bonus that if I do start going into that realm, I'll be approaching that whole thing completely different too. I'll be doing a lot of top roping. And I also want to learn about the gear a lot more. A part of my idea for my channel that I'm going to be incorporating is to test gear. I want to set up a special system where I'm able to document gear and falling on gear and assessing different kinds of placements and different kinds of actual hardware, and to really inform my audience about what's correct, what's not, how much pressure can you put on it, what's a good placement, what's a bad placement, and really give some people some point of view and really in the moment observations of what is happening during a trad fall. So that's kind of where I want to take my climbing. like really get educational with it and offer the community something that's not really out there yet. And also, just for the adventure, big mountains and stuff that aren't super, super technical, but that give you that adventure and the exploration. That's what climbing ultimately is about for me. And I think that's what this injury really taught me, was that's what is most important, and that chasing grades is I don't know, it doesn't suit me anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fair enough, right? And it's a lot to process and a lot to deal with. And I think I share your feeling for the aesthetics and the sense of adventure and the longevity and just getting out and enjoying climbing. So I think that's where I'm at myself as well.
Yep.
But I mean, I think unless you have some other things you want to say, I think that's a great place to kind of end today's session. And, thanks so much for sharing, Kyle. And, I've always said it, like, your authenticity and stuff, and how you've been really transparent with sharing things online. It's really great. It's a great resource for people. So yeah, if anybody's listening, go check out Kyle's channel and his videos and everything like that. He's got a lot of really, really great content. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Max. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Anytime, man. My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This concludes today's episode. If you have any questions or comments, both Max and I can be reached via email or social media, and our information is included in the links provided. Let's continue to have a discussion, to learn, and to actively participate in our amazing community. We want to give a special thanks to Hannah, Nate, Rains, Matt, and Peter for their effort in helping me extricate out of that canyon. Until next time, this is the Climbing Majority Podcast.